Affirmative action and preferential treatment. One recurrent question in discussion of equality and discrimination is whether it is ever justified to treat people in unequal ways as a remedy for past discrimination. This question is most frequently raised sa mga programa ng affirmative actions and preferential treatment. Affirmative actions plan try to take active affirmative steps to remedy past inequality. One way to do this is to give preferential consideration or treatment to members of group that has been discriminated against in the past. So, as of now, meron pa rin patinding pagkakaiba sa relationship sa lipunang Amerikano, which many says are the legacy of past injustices. Ilan sa mga pagkakaibang ito ay ilalarawan sa economic terms natin sa chapter 14 and yung iba na sa chapter 15. Tinatalakay natin dito yung pagkakaiba ng lahi sa criminal justice system. In terms of the general demographic of United States, based sa 2014 data, white makes up 77.4% of the population, whereas yung Hispanics makes up 17.4% and yung black makes up 13.2% and yung Asian and Pacific Islander naman makes just under 6%. But consider that only 13% African Americans has ever been a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Sa kabila nito, sumusulong tayo tungo sa higit na pagkakaiba at pagkakapantay-pantay. The 114th Congress na ginanap noong November 2014 elections is the most diverse in history kasi out of 535 members, 96 racial minorities and 104 women, which means about 20% are women and about 17% are not white. The Congress is 92% Christian, which leaves about 5% Jewish members as well as 2 Muslim members, 2 Buddhist members, and 1 Hindu member. There are also, by the way, some openly LGBT members. For us, the only way to change things, the argument goes, is to do something more positive, which will change established patterns of discrimination. Ngunit ano nga ba yung gagawin natin? There are many possibilities. One is to make a greater positive effort to find qualified person from underrepresented groups, thus in hiring a company might place ad in minority newspapers. In college admission, we can also make the counselors might recruit more actively among disadvantaged minority groups. Yung preference also may be given to underrepresented groups members who are somehow less well qualified than other applicants. In either way, it is clear that determining equality of qualification is in itself a problem. One reason for this is that applicants are usually better qualified for some aspects of a given position and less well qualified for others. Another is the challenge of determining precisely which skills are vital or required for a certain position. Although both proponents and opponents of preference frequently claim that figuring out the qualifications for a post is straightforward, it is in no way that straightforward. Umiiral din ang iba pang anyo ng affirmative actions. Halimbawa dito is, companies or organization may set objectives and quotas to be made for increasing female or minority representation. Goals are usually thought of as ideal that we aim for but that we are not absolutely required to reach. Goals can be formulated in terms of percentage or numbers, whereas yung quota naman on the other hand are typically fixed percentages or figures that an institution actually hopes to reach. As a result, a university or a professional school may reserve a specific number of spots in its incoming first-year class for members of a particular minority group. Pupunan ng institusyon ang mga posisyon na ito kahit na ang ibig sabihin nito ay pagtanggap sa mga taong with lesser overall scores or points in the assessment system. In any discussion of affirmative actions, it's critical to be clear about the specific type of behavior that one supports or rejects. Let's take a look at the justification offers to support the arguments for and against the various form of affirmative action. These arguments can be categorized into consensualism and non-consensualist approaches. Consequentialist consideration. The basis for many affirmative actions policies has been based on consequentialist arguments, both for and against them. These factors are, for the most part, utilitarian in character. The question is whether affirmative actions program do more good than harm, or more harm than good. The following kinds of consideration are urged by those who support these initiatives. These programs are beneficial for everyone. Our multiracial society benefits from racial harmony and respect because we all bring different backgrounds to our places of employment and school. We all gain from the contribution made by those with different viewpoints. Those who argued against affirmative actions on consensualism grounds usually maintain that the program do not work or that they do more harm than good. They cite statistics to show that these programs have benefited middle-class African Americans. For example, as Stephen Carter argues, the most disadvantaged black people are not in a position to benefit from preferential admission. Critics such as Carter suggested that unless affirmative action admissions programs are accompanied by other aid, both financial and tutorial, they are often useless or wasted. The ratio of blacks in various white-collar jobs has increased as a result of lawsuits brought under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. According to some dictators, stigma linked to people who have been hired or admitted through affirmative action programs, and that this stigma can be crippling for those who have been selected in this way. The key to evaluating this consensualist program both for and against affirmative action is to examine the validity of their assessments and prediction. What in fact have affirmative action programs achieved? Have they achieved little because they benefit those who least need it and might have succeeded without them, or have they actually brought more disadvantaged students into the system and employees into better and higher paying jobs, thus helping break a various cycle? These are challenging issues to evaluate. Another area where ethical decisions are based on empirical data driven by different societies or other disciplines in here. If it can be demonstrated that there is no other way to accomplish the good the program are intended to accomplish, and that the good done by these affirmative action programs outweighed any harms that create, references to negative outcomes do not always support arguments against affirmative actions policies. Some arguments make reference to ideological principles. For instance, some people argues for affirmative actions program on the ground that they provide compensatory justice in a way of compensating for past wrongs done to members of a certain groups. People have been harmed or wronged by past discrimination, and we now need to make up for that by benefiting them, by giving them preferential treatment. However, it might be challenging to determine how preferential treatment can make up for a previous mistake. It might be viewed as repairing the damage done in the past, but we see that it is frequently challenging to reverse the damage. It is a matter of trying to change the result of a past wrongs. Thus, if we are to compensate for non-consensualism reason, then it must be involved in different sense of righting a wrong, a sense of justice being done in itself, whether or not makes any difference in the outcome. They make an appeal to the idea of equality and contend that gender and race are unimportant qualities that shouldn't be taken into account by public policy. Even if these traits are employed to a person's benefit now, it is still unethical to use them to deny them equal opportunities as it was wrong in the past. They contend that racial and sexual distinctions should not be taken into account when deciding how to treat people. Benefits are denied to others when some people are given preferences. Programs that offer preferential treatment have been referred to as reverse discrimination. Moreover, opponents of affirmative action criticize the use of compensatory justice arguments. In a valid application of compensatory justice, they argued only those wrong should be compensated and only those responsible for the wrong should be made to pay. They object to affirmative actions programs that compensate people based on group membership and without establishing whether they themselves have been harmed by past discriminatory practices. Those who lost out in affirmative actions program, they argue that may not have ever been guilty of discrimination or may not have wronged anyone. This chapter has dealt with a range of issues collected together under the general rubric of equality and discrimination, racial profiling, racism, hate crimes, and affirmative actions. The guiding principle is that we should treat people fairly and equally. While there is a disagreement about how the principle of equality applies in these cases and about its moral basis, there is a widespread agreement that equality matters. Five Phases of Oppression by Iris Marion Young. Before we proceed with the discussion of Five Phases of Oppression, let's get to know Iris Marion Young. Iris Young was born on New York. After the death of her father, she and her sibling were placed in foster care where the state judged her mother to be guilty of child neglect. She achieved her BA at Queens College and went on to earn her MA and PhD in philosophy in 1974. Many individuals do not understand oppression in the same sense that new social movements do, which is one reason why they will not use the word to characterize injustice in our society. In its conventional sense, the word oppression refers to the use of tyranny by a ruling party. In dominant political discourse, it is not legitimate to use the term oppression to describe our society because oppression is the evil controlled by others. New left social movements in the 1960s and 1970s, however, shifted the meaning of the concept of oppression. In its new usage, oppression designed the disadvantage and injustice some people suffer. The tyranny of a ruling group over another, as in South Africa, must certainly be called oppressive. But oppression also refers to a systematic constraint on groups that are not necessarily the result of the intentions of a tyrant. In this view, oppression is a structural phenomenon rather than the outcome of the decision or actions of a selected few. The assumption behind institutional regulation and the collective effects of adhering to those rules are where its cause are hidden in unquestioned norms, habits, and symbols. As oppression is systematic, there is no requirement that an oppressed group have a corresponding opposing group. Although relationships between groups are a part of a structural oppression, these relationships don't necessarily match the paradigmic of the deliberate and conscious oppression of one group by another. The conscious actions of many individuals daily contribute to maintaining and reproducing oppression, but those people are usually simply doing their job or living their lives and do not understand themselves as agent of oppression. I do not mean to suggest that within a system of oppression, individual peoples do not intentionally harm others in oppressed groups. The rape woman, the beaten black youth, the locked out worker, the gay man harassed on the streets are victims of intentional actions by identifiable agent. I also do not mean to defy the specific groups or beneficiaries of the oppression of other groups, thus have an interest in their continuous oppression. Instead, for every opposed group, there is a group that is privileged in a relation to that group.